Hey everybody, Johnny here. In this video, I want to take a look at a practical example of using linked libraries in a small project setting. This whole idea came up at my day job. There I've been tasked to do some renderings of some of our products. However, some of our products are only different based on the case that they have and maybe the logo sticker on the outside. And I wanted to have the project be as simple as possible in case I needed to make adjustments. This is where library linking and library overrides can come in really handy. So let's dive into this project. Here I've created a sample object to represent the product we want to render. This isn't one of our actual products. I've modeled this in several parts, like the front panel, the box, the front screws, these cables, these grommets, and the screws that are in the grommets. Now for each set of renderings, I'm going to want to be able to change things like the case color, the front panel color, maybe the grommet color, who knows? So in this scene, I'm not overly concerned about what the materials are set as. So right now, they all just have a generic white material on them. I've put all these objects in a collection, and then I've made that collection into an asset. I've created a folder that's going to be a new temporary asset collection, where all these files are going to live. So that will be our base model, and as you can see, I've named this model.blend. Next, I want to come up with some basic materials that I'm going to use. Here in this file, I've got this shader ball object that I quickly modeled up, and I've applied several textures to each one. I have 3 versions called case, I have a black material for the grommets, and I have a metal material here for the screws. I've gone through and made sure each of these materials has been set as an asset, and then saved this file also in my projects folder. Now, let's see about applying these materials to our objects. I'm going to go ahead and fire up a new scene. From here, I'll go to my asset browser. I have my project asset library pulled up, so I see all of my objects. I have my box, and I have my materials. So in this scene, I want to go ahead and bring in my object so I can start assigning materials to it. The first thing I'm going to want to change is this setting right here. I don't want to append this data into this file, I want to link it. This means that when I load this file, it's going to go back to the original file and load the data from there. So this object model will be synced up with my object file. As you can see in the outliner, the box is here as a linked collection, so that doesn't give me very much control over this object. I can place it, I can scale it, I can rotate it, but that's about it. So I need to have some additional control over this object. I need to make this a library override. I'm going to click on this linked collection object in my outliner. Right click, go to ID data, and say make library override hierarchy. So you can see here that some things have changed. Under my collection, I now have a new icon next to my box collection. It's a chain with an arrow through it. That means that this is a library override. If I expand this, we now see all of the objects that were originally part of that, and I can expand those further to see underneath. Now, once we get past the object level, we see that the chain reappears in front of these lower items. That means we can do things now on the object level to these items, but not on the mesh or material level. So if I wanted to hide the front screws, I could click on them, and here I can hide them individually now because that happens on the object level. So here, let's put the case number 1 material on the front panel. But now let's see what happens when we save this. If I save this file, then I go to File and click Revert, which would take me back to my save, which I just did, you'll see that the material goes away. There's a reason for this. So we're going to need to do something special on our original object in order to be able to change its materials. Back over in our original object model, we want to select one of our objects. And then over here in our material panel, we're going to change a setting that we don't normally change. It's this little drop-down box right here. This says, do we link the material to this object or to its data? By default, it's set to link to the object's data. Instead, we want to link this material straight to the object itself. So I'm going to change this to object. Now our material has gone away. So I'm just going to create a new material for this slot. I'm going to go ahead and do this for my other objects as well. it would be quite a hassle to have to go through and do this for each object, so what I'm going to do is select all of my objects, then just select one of them, and then on this box, I'm going to Alt-click and choose Object. The Alt-click means that that is going to be applied to every applicable object. So you see all of these are now changed to Object. In addition, I'm going to select them all again and go back and choose my front case again. And then I'm going to say Control L to link and link materials. Now all of the objects have that material applied. I'm going to save this and go back to my scene file. To quickly reload from library, with this file saved, I'm just going to go to File, Revert. And now you can see that that material that we dragged onto this object before is now showing up, because this object is set to use its objects material, not the data material. I'm sure somebody else could explain why this is better, but for now you can trust me on it. Let's go ahead and drag on the other materials we need. We'll go ahead and save this, and if we go to File Revert now, we see that those all keep, because the materials have been set to object level rather than data level. Now here's where things can get a little interesting. I'm going to go ahead and set this whole collection that contains my box as an asset. We're going to call this Case 1 Box. I'll right-click and mark as asset, and I also want to remove the camera and the light from this because I don't want those to travel along with these. I have my box, but I also have Case 1 Box as well. Let's do a file save as on Case 1 and call it Case 2. So now we're in file Case 2. I'll go ahead and apply the different material to this one. I'm going to rename this as Case 2 Box and save. And now that I refresh, you see that I have Case 1 Box and Case 2 Box. Already one thing you might notice is that this is awfully confusing to have all three of these boxes be gray. So let's go ahead and fix that by jumping back to our materials file. I'm just going to right-click on one of these materials and open Blend File. And here on each of these, I'll Control-C over the base color, go down to Viewport Display, and Control-V over the viewport display color. Now, I'll go ahead and save this file and close it. Now in this file, making sure it's saved, I'm just going to hit Revert. That's reloaded my libraries. So now, if I go down to my Case 2 box in my asset browser, go to my end panel and regenerate the preview, you'll see that the preview now reflects the color. What about Case 1 box? If I go on that one, it's grayed out. To redo this one, I'm going to have to open its file. So I'll right-click and open Blend File. And from here, I'll do the same thing. And now I'll quickly do the third case. Now that we have our three cases built, we want to create a scene where we can render these. So let's open a new file. I'm going to want a ground plane, and perhaps a sky texture. I'll go to the asset browser, and making sure my setting is set to link, I'll link in my Case 1 box. So here's our first setup. Now since we want to minimize our work, I want to reuse this same setup for my remaining items. So I'm going to link in case number 2 and case number 3. On case number 1, I'm going to do a cursor to selected, select 2 and 3, and do a selected to cursor. Now all three of these are inhabiting the same space. Over here in my render settings, I'm going to go ahead and disable 2 and 3. I could go back. Now I could do my render of object 1 and then disable it. I could then enable object 2 and do its render and then disable it, and then enable object 3 and do its render. I'll go ahead and save this file and call it scene. This would be the file that I would set up all of my render settings, my lighting, and all of that. Since we've linked our materials and object into the case files, and then linked those collections into my scene collection, I can make changes to the original object, to the original materials, to the combinations of case 1, 2, and 3, or add extra items to each of those, and those results will end up in the scene file. So I could open the case 2 material and change it to metallic. I'll save this file and close it, and then I'll revert my scene file. And as you can see, my case 2 is now metallic. But say I needed to change the model itself. I could simply open my box file and make the changes I needed. Now I'll go ahead and save my model file. I'll revert my scene file. My changes to my model have now propagated down. And if I open up my case 1 box, you'll see its material's the same, but it got the new changes to the model. Now let's say I need to add a prop to the case 3 only. I can open my case 3 file and add my prop. And as long as that prop is in the asset in my box 3 file, it will now propagate down to my scene file for case 3. So I'll save that, and back in my scene file, I'll go ahead and revert and enable case 3. And there it is. This has been really handy as I've gotten notes and adjustments on each subsequent render. If a material isn't quite right, or an object needs to be changed a little, I can make those changes at the lowest level possible without affecting the other objects in the scene. And being able to bring them all back together in the same scene is really helpful for being able to do sets of renders of these objects from exactly the same spot with exactly the same settings without having to duplicate that file multiple times and worry about them getting out of sync. I hope this inspires you to make something awesome. Thanks for all your support, and until next time, I'll catch you later.